The spark comes not at the idea. The spark comes probably halfway through the book dummy. And the book dummy is a fake handmade version of the book. It's the first version of the book that you do. You make it in the studio, and it's where you solve all the problems. It's where you figure out where the text is going to go, where the drawings are going to go. And it's when you start to realize what the book is going to look like. It starts telling you what it wants to be. And that is one of the most exciting parts for me of making a book, because this thing that's been in your head for, in this case, years, is now not just a collection of sketches and notes. It's actually being put into a little tiny book. And so you start to see, you get glimpses, almost premonitions of the future, of what this book is going to look like. And it's very, very exciting. And then it's usually followed by complete and utter terror, because then you realize how much work you have to do from this point to finishing the book and getting it ready for press. A lot of times I don't think it's real. I mean, I worked so hard for so many years to be an illustrator and to be able to come up to kind of realize my stories and make my stories real. And I think, like any creative person, you think nobody's going to like it. You're inspired by it, you're motivated by it, but then in the end of the day, you're like, no one is going to like this. No kids are going to like my stories. No kids are going to respond to my art. And so to have a kid come up to you at a bookstore and say, I love this book, or a parent on the street go, oh my God, my kid loves the Spiderwick books, or my child loves the Spider and the Fly. It's an incredible validation. It keeps you going. It keeps you, it keeps me motivated. The illustrations for Arthur Spiderwick's field guide were tough at best. They were not easy for me to do. I struggled very hard with them, because what I wanted them to do was be extremely, extremely detailed and realistic. And that meant a lot of tedious time doing research on animals and plants and insects and fish, etc., in the drawing stage. The mediums that I used were very similar to John James Audubon. And Audubon was a naturalist who worked many years ago, primarily painting images of birds and cataloging birds all over North America. I wanted to do the paintings in the field guide very reminiscent of his style, and so I used the same tools that he used. Pencils, very detailed pencil drawings that were then colored with very thin coats of gouache, which is like watercolor paint, but it's a little thicker. You just add water to it. So I would do very detailed pencil drawings of the creatures. These could take anywhere from a day or two to sometimes up to a week. Um, and then once I was satisfied with the design and the drawing of the creature, I would go in and start laying in thin glazes of color. And again, that could take anywhere from a couple days to a week. I worked back to back on all the illustrations. There was no free time for me. I had to work very quickly because the deadline for the book was extremely tight. And so it was a very long and intense period of time, but I was very satisfied at the end with the results. A couple times I do remember finishing the painting and being completely unhappy with how it came out and having to go back and start over again. So I wanted the quality to remain at a very, very high level. I saw it in my mind, and if it didn't meet that vision that I saw in my mind, it was back to the drawing board for me. That the field guide would do would be incite their own imaginations, so that they would be like, Tony's giant was really good, but I think I could come up with an even better giant. And my giant looks like this, and it does this, and it eats this. Because that's what happened to the books that I was inspired by. Growing up looking at Arthur Rackham's artwork, or Brian Froud's artwork, or the Robinson brothers, and how much I loved looking at their art. And I wished for so many years to aspire to be able to draw like those people, but then to be able to go, but what would I do to make it different, to make it better, to make it my own? And so I think in many ways that's what I want the field guide to do in the long term, is I want it to inspire kids to think about characters that have been in fairy tales and folklore and legends for hundreds of years, and keep that stuff alive, because I think it's important. That stuff means a lot to me. I know it meant to me a lot to me when I was a kid. I'd like to think it means a lot to children today. The illustrations took anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to complete. Some took longer. One that comes to mind is like the Griffin. He had a lot of feathers that I had to do. I tried to do every single little filament in every single feather, and so it was a little more tedious. The mermaids also took a while to do because, again, a lot of fish scales and stuff. But I wanted the stuff to be very, very believable. I wanted it to compete with the realistic special effects we see in movies or the realistic renderings that we see in video games, and I wanted this book to be kind of an alternative to those things. I mean, Holly did folklore information that went with all of the creatures in the entries. But what I did is, as I was doing the sketches of all the different animals, I wrote notes about what they smelled like, the sounds they made, maybe how they moved, very similar to what a naturalist would do if they were doing paintings or studies of a creature out in the wild. And so you had this kind of organic note taking and caption writing that went around the artwork, that kind of illuminated the artwork and tried to make it go beyond just a two-dimensional picture and really try to bring the creatures to life. I think what I would tell a young artist is it doesn't matter what I think in some ways. Growing up, I never got to meet any known artists, any known illustrators. I knew a lot of them in my mind. I mean, I looked at books of theirs. I copied pictures from them. But the only people who really encouraged me were my parents. My parents were the ones who said it was okay to draw monsters and sharks and dinosaurs. They were the ones that said if you don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer, you don't have to. They were the ones who said imagine, dream, follow that dream. If that's what you really want to do is write books for children and come up with crazy stories for children, then go do that. And so I would say that to them, but I think I would say it more to their parents, that their parents should encourage them, because that meant the most to me, was the validation from my parents.